We live in northwestern Montana and we only have access to softwoods. Here is what I've learned about burning exclusively softwoods as our one and only way to warm our home in the deep winter, plus a rough way to estimate how much firewood you need and if your homestead will provide that. I am using timestamps, so feel free to skip around the video, and don't forget that this is an article on thehomesteaderschronicle.com. I also made a pin for that article, so feel free to pin it to your Pinterest board to read later on. Here's what you should know about burning softwoods, aka evergreens, or sometimes just called pines. Softwood is not as dangerous or scary as you may have been led to believe. If you have the option of burning hardwoods, definitely use it, but if you live in an alpine region and you don't have access to hardwoods like we don't fret over it because it's still a great material and it's going to serve you well. Softwoods do burn hotter and faster, but in some ways that is a perk. Most softwoods tend to have a lower energy content, which is measured in British thermal units or BTUs compared to hardwood. 1 BTU is enough heat to raise the temperature of 1 pound of water by 1 degree in Fahrenheit. A match produces about 1 BTU. This means that softwood burns faster and provides less heat per unit of wood. For example, softwoods like pine, fir, and spruce may produce 15 to 20% less heat than hardwoods like oak, maple, or hickory. The upside to this is that it burns hot, and you'll notice that the first time you open your stove door and your brows singe off instantly. I grew up in the Midwest with hardwoods, and now I live in northwestern Montana with softwoods, and there is a big noticeable difference. But on nights when the temperatures drop to -40 and below, it is so nice to have a wood that is exceptionally hot. Yes, you're going to have to restock your fire more often, but when things are that cold, you're probably going to be up every couple hours to break out fresh water for your livestock anyway, and you will be so grateful for that heat. Next, softwood has more sap, usually. The sap in softwood can create more creosote, which is this black, sticky substance that often accumulates in your chimneys or flues. If it's not regularly cleaned, creosote can lead to chimney fires. This is more of an issue when soft and hardwoods are used interchangeably in the same stove. What I mean by this is that hardwoods burn cooler and longer, letting the stovepipe or chimney cool off and then allowing that creosote to set up. When you're burning softwoods exclusively, the chimney maintains a hotter temperature more consistently. This prevents the creosote from setting up and sticking to it. Wet softwood does allow the creosote to set up, so only use dry wood. Very broadly and generally speaking, I think that people who have access to hardwoods generally have warmer temperatures, so they don't have a fire going constantly. And letting that fire go out for a few days is what really lets that resin set up in the chimney or the flue. If you are only occasionally using softwood, you really need to be more careful about that buildup. Wet softwoods are definitely more dangerous about letting that creosote set up, so like I said, only use dry wood. But I will go ahead and tell you that our first year in our new home here in Montana, we did not have enough time to dry our wood, and we had to use wet softwoods. To take care of this, we cleaned the flue out every single month for that entire winter season. Once a month was definitely overkill, but it really gave us a peace of mind and kept us from having to deal with any flue fires. And on that note, triple wall flues are the best. You can have single or double pipe, but triple walls allow a fire to actually burn up into the flue without as much of a threat of your house catching on fire. We have a triple wall flue, and it really lets me sleep so much better at night. That extra resin and softwood may cause your logs to crackle and pop a lot more as they burn, which is more dangerous if you're not aware of this. In the wintertime, I lay a thick doormat over top of my cowhide that rests in front of the fire. So if any coals or sap pops out, that lands on the mat and it does not singe the cowhide, which does not smell good if burned. I also keep a metal scoop and a broom by the fire to wrangle those loose coals back into the stove. Something else you should know is that softwood dries a lot faster than hardwoods. We rarely cut down live trees. The only two exceptions to this are when we cut a safety fire line around our home and outbuildings. Since we live in an area with a high wildfire risk, it is wise to keep a 100+ foot radius clear so that way it is easier to fight off potential forest fires. The second exception to this is that we cut down live trees to mill for building our greenhouse and timber horse barn. We ran the bottom 3/4-ish of the tree through the sawmill to make beams and boards, and the top 1/4 of the tree is just too thin to use for building, so we let it dry out and split it into firewood. We let this green, aka wet, wood dry for about a year before burning it. Dead standing, meaning trees that have died but haven't fallen over yet, and fallen trees that are dead and have been laying on the ground for a while will only need a few weeks to finish curing, aka drying, before being burned in the wood stove. We have enough fallen trees on our place to keep us well stocked through the winter. Don't worry, I will talk about this in more depth later on. Next, it's important to know the Softwoods BTUs. I have listed common softwood trees and their BTUs in millions per cord. If you go over to the homesteaderschronicle.com and check out the accompanying article, I have linked to guides for every single one of these tree species, so that way you can identify them both by their needles or by their bark. I find it much easier to learn how to ID the needles in the pine cone first. Once you've got that down pat, go ahead and learn what the bark looks like as well. That will make it so much easier once you've begun cutting, stacking, and transporting the wood. It does take a bit of skill to memorize bark identification, but that is such a huge asset to have when you're burning firewood. Before I talk about the different species and their BTUs, let me show you what a cord is. A cord is a volume of wood about 128 cubic feet. Most often this is measured as being 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and 8 feet long. But as long as it adds up to 128 cubic feet, you're good to go. Most hardwood cords will weigh between 2 and 2.5 tons, which is between 4,000 and 5,000 pounds, while softwood is closer to 1 to 1.5 tons, which is 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. When I talk about these numbers, remember that this is in millions and it's per cord. For example, the Douglas fir is 26.5, ponderosa pines are 16.2, white pine is 15.9, spruce is 15.5, western red cedar is 18.2, and western larch, aka tamarack, is 28.7. At our house, we mostly burn western larch and Douglas fir, but as you can tell by our name, we have quite a few cedars, and so probably 5 to 10% of what we burn is western red cedar. That's not because we love it, it's just because we have quite a bit of it, and when it falls and gets in our way, we're going to cut it up and use it to the best of our ability. So how many BTUs do you need to heat your house up? This really varies based on your location and climate, your elevation, the length of your winter, the size of your home, how well your home is insulated, the quality of your windows, how tall your ceilings are, and the microclimate around your home, as well as your desired indoor temperature. To get a general range, you can look at this map, identify your county, and then decide which zone it is in. Zone 1 needs between 30 and 35 BTUs per square foot, while Zone 7 needs between 60 and 65 BTUs per square foot. Multiply the square feet in your home by your region's range. If your home is well insulated, assume the lower number. If your home has poorer insulation, assume the higher number. Also, if you want to get nitpicky, this estimate assumes that you have a standard ceiling height of 8 feet. For every additional foot above 8 feet, you need to add 12.5%. So for a 9-foot ceiling, you need to multiply the BTUs by 1.125 to get the most adequate estimation. So while we're looking at this map, I can give you an example. A 1,000 square foot home in Zone 5 would look like this. 1,000 times 50 equals 50,000. Or 1,000 times 55 equals 55,000. So this home needs between 50,000 and 55,000 BTU. Our home is 1,600 square feet in Zone 6. Calculating it for Zone 6 means we would need between 88,000 and 96,000 BTU. BTU is per hour as a maximum. Now, once you've got your home heated up, it is not going to need that high number to maintain temperature. This is the part that gets so complicated and made me very, very angry. The very best I could do to figure out how many BTUs are needed for the year and not for the hour is to look up natural gas and propane information for different regions and then compare that info to the map and those BTUs. I also compared that to our personal use to make sure that these numbers were making sense, and luckily it did. Oh, and as a side note, 100 ccf of natural gas equals 103,700 BTU. So if you would like to share how much natural gas your family uses, that could maybe be helpful for other readers. The very best formula I could come up with for figuring out how many BTUs your house will need for a year is taking 1,000 times your BTUs per hour, which will equal roughly how many BTUs your home needs for the year. So where did 1,000 come from? Well, I found data online from surveys and informal sites like Reddit to see how much natural gas a person used per year. I used their home size and rough location to calculate BTU needed per hour using the above map. Over and over, I kept finding that their annual consumption of natural gas is 1,000 times what their hourly BTU would be. It is definitely not exact, but I have not found anyone else online with a better solution. I am hoping someone can use this information to build a better method for calculating firewood needs. I also looked through forums and Facebook groups to see people's self-reported annual firewood usage and ran their home size and location through the BTU calculator. I also asked on my Facebook page for additional info, which thank you if you answered that, and that still ended up giving me right around 1,000 as the multiplier to connect these two values. And it does work for our home too. On the low end, 1,000 times 880,000 BTU equals 88 million BTU for the year. And on the high end, 1,000 times 96,000 BTU equals 96 million BTU for the year. Now that I've explained how I got these numbers, I can move on to the next section and then explain how that translates to your firewood. To calculate how much firewood your house needs for the year, you are going to take BTUs needed for the home divided by BTUs per quart of firewood times the efficiency of your wood stove, which you can look up online, and that will equal the number of cords needed to heat your home. If you only burn one tree species, this is very easy work. If you use a mix, you're going to need to estimate the percentages of each species used and their BTU values before plugging all of that into the equation. Our household burns about 30% Douglas fir, 5% western red cedar, 5% spruce, and 60% western larch. That is calculated as 0.3 times 26.5 million, 0.5 times 18.2 million, 0.5 times 15.5 million, and 0.6 times 28.7 million. Now we add each of these numbers up to get our total cord value. In this instance, it would be 26.8 million BTU per cord. So now we take that 26.8 million and we multiply that times 0.81, which is the efficiency of a King 40 Blaze King wood stove. It is 81% efficient, so therefore we get 0.81 as the multiplier. That gives us 21.75 million. So we take 88 million and we divide that by 21.75 million, and that gives us roughly 4. That means we need 4 cords of firewood to heat our house for the year, and that adds up just about perfectly. Our woodshed holds about 5.5 cords, and we usually end up burning around 4 cords of it every single year. If you're exclusively burning firewood for your home, please put your numbers through this calculator and tell me if it's accurate or not. I really would like to get as many data points as possible to make it much easier for new people who are just starting out with a brand new wood stove or have just recently moved. Because we moved to a brand new state with a toddler, I just had a C-section within 2 weeks of moving, and we needed to cut a lot of firewood for our house, and we had no idea how much firewood we needed. That was kind of stressful, and I'm sure there are tons of other people out there who have found themselves in similar situations. So if there's anything we can do to make that easier for them, I would love to do so. Well, now that we know how much firewood we need to sustain our wood stove and our home for the year, we can figure out how many acres of timber we need to heat our home sustainably. This part is actually really easy. A good rule of thumb is that you can harvest between 1/2 and 1.5 cords of wood per acre of timber. So a 20-acre forest will give you between 10 to 30 cords of firewood per year. This is not how many cords of firewood you can technically retrieve from that land. If you want to clear cut, meaning you cut down every single tree as if you're making it into pasture, that would give you closer to 30 cords per acre. So if you need 2 cords for your home, then you need between 1 to 3 acres to maintain your home's heat for the year. Multiply the cords you need by 0.5 and 2 to get your range. If you don't have enough acreage to cover your firewood needs, you've got a couple options. There's the obvious solution of buying your firewood, but that's kind of boring. If you live near the U.S. Forest Service, you can go in and apply for a permit. For instance, where we live, here in northwestern Montana, we are right next to the Kootenai National Forest. We can go to the U.S. Forest Service office and apply for a firewood permit there. I think they take our family size, or maybe it's our home size, and they calculate that next to our elevation. and then they come up with a number of how many cords of firewood we can get. I think that permit used to be like $5 to $20 a year, but as of late it has been completely free. You just need to fill out the paperwork and it's all good to go. It's just for their records. If you don't have access to the U.S. Forest Service or that is not available in your area, then I recommend you find some crop farmers in your area and very politely reach out to them. I am saying this as someone from the Midwest who both sides of my family farmed. Those crop farmers do not want fallen trees in their fields. It's going to be very easy for you to get permission to go in and clean up the fields when there are windstorms or snowstorms. That will ensure they can use the maximum amount of their fields and it will save them a lot of work. But don't be lazy about it and don't leave the tops and the little branches behind. Pick up as many little sticks as you possibly can and really clean it up so that way it is mutually beneficial for both you and the farmer. Of course, you can also barter with people if that is more of an option. But I hope that gave you a few ideas to get your wheels spinning and hopefully find something that works for you and your family. I hope this was helpful and I'll see you guys next Monday. Thank you so much for being here.